The last Royal Air Force Lancaster bomber still flying sweeps in to commemorate one of the most spectacular raids of World War II. On May 16, 1943, using an ultra-secret new weapon, the bouncing bomb, the RAF attacked the hydroelectric dams that supplied Germany's industrial heartland. The squadron flew in pitch darkness at the almost suicidal height of 60 feet. One after another, the bombers dropped their deadly cargo, seemingly oblivious to the concentrated fire of enemy flak. The bouncing bomb skipped across the water, crashing into the dam's wall and sunk. Moments later, it exploded in a huge geyser of water. The Moehne Dam collapsed from the massive pounding of high explosives, and a torrent of water rushed into the valley below, causing untold damage. The Dam Busters raid was one of the most successful feats of precision bombing in World War II, and it was made possible by the unrivaled flying expertise of 617 Squadron and the genius inventor of the bouncing bomb, Dr. Barnes Wallis. When Adolf Hitler became Chancellor of Germany in 1933, he began a massive campaign to rebuild Germany's armed forces. The terms of the Versailles Treaty at the end of World War I had stripped the German military machine. Under Hitler's government, the production of tanks, guns, and other weapons of war commenced in the industrial heartland of Germany, the Ruhr. Most of the power and water for this vast industrial complex was provided by a series of hydroelectric dams and their enormous reservoirs. The dams included the Moehne, Eder, and Sorpe. Together, they provided nearly two-thirds of the Ruhr's energy needs. A growing threat to Europe was brewing inside Nazi Germany, but the British were slow to respond. Only reluctantly did the factories of Britain turn to the manufacture of weapons of war in 1936. The production of weapons designed for defense, such as the fighter planes of the British Royal Air Force, was a top priority. The Hurricane and the Spitfire became the backbone of fighter command. But the Royal Air Force also handled an offensive arm, Bomber Command. Its principal aircraft was the Vickers-Armstrong Wellington twin-engine bomber. The Wellington was designed by a brilliant aeronautical engineer, Dr. Barnes Wallis. Its construction was based on one of Wallis's earlier works, the R-100 airship. In the late 1920s, the R-100 was Britain's most successful airship. The Wellington retained the geodetic framework of the R-100. Not only was its latticework construction extremely sturdy, the plane could continue flying with considerable battle damage. Designed by Wallis and built by Vickers-Armstrong as a private venture, the Wellington was highly advanced for its time.
Any signs of life?
In September 1937, the Bombing Committee of the Air Ministry identified the dams serving the Ruhr as potential targets of war. If the dams were breached and the reservoirs emptied, industrial production in the Ruhr, so vital to Germany's war effort, could be seriously disrupted. But the Royal Air Force did not possess a bomb that was heavy enough to damage the masonry structures, let alone break the dams. In 1939, the heaviest general-purpose bomb in the Royal Air Force Armory weighed only 500 pounds. Not until 1940 did a 1,000-pound general-purpose bomb enter service. Independently of the Air Ministry, Barnes Wallis recognized that the Ruhr dams were a critical target, and if destroyed, could shorten the war dramatically. In October 1939, using German plans printed in pre-war engineering journals, Wallis devised a strategy to breach the Ruhr dams.
And I thought of what would be an engineer's way of stopping the war, and that would be to cut off the power supply to their great armament factories in the Ruhr. which involved bombing the dams, destroying the dams, because, you know, it takes 150 tons of water to make 1 ton of steel. And if we robbed them of all their water supply, they couldn't produce steel, and the war would have come to an end.
Wallace calculated that a 10-ton bomb dropped from 40,000 feet and landing within 150 feet of a masonry dam would cause a shock wave similar to an earthquake, and so massive the dam would collapse. In March 1941, he submitted a comprehensive report to the Air Ministry entitled A Method of Attacking the Axis Powers. The Air Ministry set up a commission to study his proposal. It was called the Aerial Attack on Dams Committee, but there was a catch. No aircraft at the time was capable of carrying the estimated 10-ton load. Undaunted, Wallace proposed the design of a 50-ton Victory bomber capable of carrying his 10-ton earthquake bomb. The plan was met with skepticism by the Air Ministry, but Air Marshal Arthur Tedder gave his support. Tedder introduced Wallace to Lord Beaverbrook, the Minister for Aircraft Production, who tracked the development of the Victory bomber. Wallace was also supported by a member of the Dams Committee, Dr. William Glanville of the Rhodes Research Laboratories at Harmansworth. Glanville volunteered his laboratory for experimental testing. A model of the Moehne Dam was painstakingly constructed at the Building Research Station at Garston. Charges made to scale were exploded at various distances from the water face of the model dam to assess the amount of explosives needed to cause a breach. Early results were not encouraging. Even with the introduction in late 1941 of more powerful explosives, the size of the charge needed to breach the dam was far greater than first thought. Wallace and his team decided to continue the experiments, this time against a much larger structure. An abandoned dam at Nantygro in Wales was selected. The Nantygro Dam was approximately 1/5 the size of the Moehne. But first, more tests were conducted on a model 1/10 the size of the Nantygro Dam. Again, the experiments were discouraging. So was the first explosion on the real Nantygro Dam. Wallace calculated that an explosive charge of approximately 13 tons would be needed to breach the dam. Not even the projected Victory bomber could carry such a load. The task seemed hopeless. Wallace would have to find another way to destroy the dams. Throughout the spring of 1942, Dr. Barnes Wallace continued his relentless campaign to design a bomb that could breach Germany's dams. By chance, a colleague of Wallace's, Dr. A. Collins, made a breakthrough discovery. After a failed experiment, Collins decided to demolish his damaged model. He did so by placing a small charge in contact with the water side of the dam. The result was spectacular.
Watch it! Fire!
With the contact explosion, a much smaller charge was needed. A test was set up at the Nantygro Dam, where previous explosives had failed. On July 24th, a 500-pound charge was suspended against the dam wall at a depth of 10 feet. The dam disintegrated. Calculations indicated that a 7,000-pound charge detonated 30 feet below the water surface could breach the Moehne Dam, but only if the explosion occurred in direct contact with the dam wall. Torpedoes were considered, but quickly rejected because of the defensive booms and the nets protecting the dams.